It's not a therapeutic environment. It's not the controlled environment. But guess what? It is a little bit like it, because when you go with me to Thailand, like Julia did, and you see that in a lot of situations where they do the therapy, it's a little bit of controlled chaos. It's not all quiet and all meditative and all, it's private, and, it's not like that. It's not. In fact, in some areas, like at Wat Po, for example, it's 30 beds that are only 3 inches apart. 30 mats that are only 3 inches apart, that are completely full of people, and people coming and going the whole time. And guess what? It's always been like that. It's never not been like that.
And you still fall asleep.
And you still fall asleep, and you still go off into the zone. The smell of the kurtop in the background, the smell of lemongrass and maklo and ginger in the atmosphere, But it is still, when they move around you, okay, they're thoughtful and deliberate in emotions, thoughtful and deliberate. So even when we're practicing, it's really easy to forget that we're practicing on people, because you get to know each other. To know you is to love you, not. So people tend to get in class progressively. They get more casual with each other, and almost to the point of where people will walk over each other to get to the other side of the room. Which at the beginning of class, you never would have done that. Taking a shortcut, like through somebody's mat over the client, get over to something that I'm just going for some water. I'm just going to get my water on. At the beginning of class, you never would have done that. But it starts getting to this point. We get more casual with each other, and you occasionally kick your practice partner as you step across in one side or another, and and actually you want to monitor that. You do. It's part of the attention span that we want to that we really want to build in little things that keep us tracking. Okay, don't jump, don't hop, don't skip, don't leap. Okay, we're not doing Chinese acrobats, or we're not doing acro yoga. Okay, because acro yoga is not therapeutic. We're doing therapy. So in non-therapy practice of yoga, you can leap. You can do chaturanga, leaping, flying chaturangas, like flying fish. In the classroom, perfectly fine. What? That's called exercise. It's not therapy. It's exercise. Anything that you do in practice that has a relative risk of injury is not therapy. You see? So practices, like yoga practices, where there's actually a risk that in every class that someone will get injured doing it, from doing it, that's not therapy. It's exercise. Now, exercise is cool. I love exercise. Not anymore, but I used to. I was a kickboxer. I had great joy. I actually won a national championship with a technique which required me to jump up in the air, spin around backwards, and kick a guy in the head so hard that the first part of his body to hit the mat was the back of his head. And when I completed the spin after knocking this guy head over heels backwards with a jump flying back spin kick, which caught him square in the face. And when I landed, like that, the crowd went wild. That was great fun. I actually was one of the people who volunteered to take him to the hospital because I knocked 2 teeth out and broke his nose. But that's also the fight game, by the way. People get hurt, and then it's actually those are the same people, the ones who hurt you, are the ones who are like, no, I got a car, I'll get my car, we'll get to it, because they wish that for themselves. You know, it's like, I hope people are on it. If I ever get knocked out or busted up, that they're not just going to walk away and go, wow, sucks to be you. You know, because I've had that experience trying to get to the hospital on my own, and after having something broken, and it wasn't my favorite day. You know. So I want to bring vigilance. See, there's nothing wrong with these things, you know, with leaping about and having fun, and being athletic and being extreme in your motions, okay? I love Chinese acrobatics, you know? You want to see extreme acro yoga? You don't go to an acro yoga class. They're amateurs. You want to see extreme acrobatics and body positioning? You go to Cirque du Soleil, and you go to the Chinese acrobats, because they'll do everything that you could imagine somebody would do in acro yoga, 50 feet in the air, hanging from a thread, or stacked up on top of 22 wooden chairs that they piled up on top of each other, willy-nilly. Okay, or like the Walendas, doing all the balancing posture. I saw the great Walenda when I was a kid, when I was 12 years old, walk across Tallulah Gorge in northern Georgia. This is before they had the big accident. 21 family members were killed in one accident. It's the year before that. And I watched the old man, great Walenda, do a 12-person pyramid on top of a gorge 250 feet high with no net. Okay, you want to see some balancing? You want to see some strength and coordination? Go to a circus. It's circus arts. I have a niece who was in the Olympics on floor exercise. You want to see someone who could do locust and scorpion while leaping through hoops with balls and ribbons? Right? It's called floor exercise in the Olympics. Okay? Every single person who competes in that sport can do the most advanced yoga postures that you can find in any book anywhere. Every single one of them. And if you can't, you're not competitive. Every single one of them. Okay? There's nothing special about extreme postures. Okay? And there's nothing special about jumping and leaping and spinning and flipping, other than it feels good. It's fun. Like I said, I used to do that. When I was even as late as when I was 36 years old, I could still do a standing back flip. 36 years old, I could still do it. I could actually stand. From age 14 to age 36, I could just stand with both feet together, and I could jump up in the air and land, do a complete backflip and land on both feet. 8 or 9 times out of 10. Every once in a while, I'd lose it. I won a contest when I was 31 years old where I jump kick a basketball hoop, a regulation basketball hoop, freestanding, flat-footed, standing under the hoop, jumped up and kicked it, made it ring like a bell, and I won $50. Because the rule was not just that you had to kick it, everybody in the group could hit it. Everyone in my group could hit it. Actually, maybe I'll dig up a couple of pictures of my roommate. I have pictures of him. He could jump 10 feet in the air. He could actually get inverted. He could put both feet on a basketball hoop and land with both feet. And he could do it every single time. Sahan Kim. He could do that every single time. Okay? We were the leaping, flying Zen masters. We were. We're world champions at leaping, at jumping and leaping. My teacher, Bill Wallace, was the fastest man in the world for 9 years. Had the fastest kick, clocked at 99 miles per hour on a handheld radar. His kick was as fast as a world-class baseball pitcher's fastest fastball. And he could get it up to that speed in 3 feet. And he knocked 370 people out with that kick. Okay, that's my teacher, and I could do it. But this is therapy. So when we're on the mat, we have to have a different kind of attention. We're not trying to be extreme. We're not trying to be that challenge you. We want to be slow and deliberate. We always want to be conscious of our movements around the mat. Don't step on each other's fingers or hands, or kick the knees, or step over, or leap over, or move over anybody at any time, unless you're doing it on purpose. Right? If you're not doing it on purpose, always go around the periphery. And just as a general idea, it's always better to walk around the periphery, and you never, ever kneel over someone's head or put your groin in their face, unless you want to have a date with them. Or on a date, is what I should say.
I want to have a date with you.
That's right. Especially in the royal method, we're conscious of our groin over the face. Okay. So, other than that, just have fun, but be deliberate. Okay. It's good to, outside of class, in other words, you want to be athletic with your yoga, by all means, knock yourself out. I used to do that, and we used to love that. I have great affinity for leaping about and doing kind of extreme things, What were we going to say there?
I'm just curious, have you, a friend of mine's trained with a group called Thai Yoga Circus, just kind of came out. Have you heard of that? You haven't heard of that?
No, I don't approve. Because it encourages people to not do therapy. You see? It's distracting. I don't want to be in the first generation of people in the history of the world in the last 2,500 years to destroy this art and to make it other than medicine.
I should say it was in Lao. I don't know if that makes a difference.
I don't know. Don't care where it was. It's medicine. But if you want to have fun, and do acrobatic things, don't call it the medicine. Don't use the same name. I like the acro yoga people in the sense because they learned they came out of my class, okay? But they changed the name, you see? And that's okay. I like that. That's good. You see, it makes it less likely to confuse that with real therapy, okay? But Thai yoga acrobatics and Thai yoga, which a lot of people started with, and I was like, no, don't do that, okay? Because remember, we're supposed to be representing a multi-thousand-year tradition of monks, people who literally lived and died as a result of this work. It was their life. They wouldn't have lived or survived without it. And to make light of it and to say that some frivolous thing we're doing is the same as what the old man practiced for 70 years, saving lives, it's horribly disrespectful. And only Western people do that stuff. Primarily Americans. Because you know why? Because we don't care about culture because we don't have any. So we don't validate it. And we think everything is up for grabs. We do it to Native Americans. That's why we were so casual about our genocide of Native Americans, even to the present day. Oh, get over it. That was a long time ago. Tell it to the survivors of Auschwitz. Let it go. Come on. It's a long time ago. They meant well. I'm sure they meant well. Tell it's just no different to the Cherokees than Auschwitz or Dachau, Buchenwald for the Jewish people. It's no difference. Helen, Georgia, for the Cherokees. No different. They were rounded up, put in camps, moved to Oklahoma by foot, weren't allowed to ride horses or wagons, had to walk, and had 80% mortality by the end of the first 12 months from start to finish. So don't tell them about, Native American stuffs. Just let it go. They can't. They shouldn't. So their grandpa, their grandma. It's not that long ago. So it was 1860s, 1840s to 1860s. Great grandpa was still kicking. If they survived, right? Same for the Crows, same for the Sioux, same for the most people don't know, 500 nations. You know the Sioux, you've heard that. You've heard of a few other, maybe you've heard of the Crows, because they're big. Maybe you've heard of, the Winnebagos, Maybe you've heard of the Pueblo Indians, like, the Zunis and so on. But what about the 495 others? 495 other tribes that you don't know, that you've never heard of. Why? Because some of them, like the unincorporated Tallahassee Seminoles, there's only like 22 of them left of the whole tribe, and they don't have a reservation. They live in a house. They live in a trailer park. It's like 3 trailers. They don't have a casino. It's like 22 of them. They go fishing on the weekends. It's their Indian thing, But they're the last living descendants of an actual whole tribe that was ordered destroyed by General Sherman. And they were destroyed, All right, why am I talking about this? It's just tradition. We don't want to do that to our tradition. We don't want to be the first. I'm saying I don't know about, and I wish that for you. I don't want to be in the generation that drops the ball on a multi-thousand-year tradition of healing, because technically, when I look around in the world, I think we need it more. I actually think we need it more. See, 1,000 years ago, they didn't have to deal with Fukushima radiation, which will be everywhere in the world within 10 years. They didn't have to deal with that, okay? They didn't have to deal with contaminated water supply and all the diseases that are born by contaminated water, okay? They didn't have to deal with the prevalence of xenoestrogens, which now can be bioassayed from any water source anywhere in the world. You can't find a water source that's not a deep aquifer well that doesn't have xenoplasticizers and estrogens in it. They didn't have to deal with the widespread use of antibiotics. They didn't have to deal with the widespread malnutrition from mineral depletion. They didn't have to deal with spent plutonium munitions birth defects caused by spent plutonium munitions. I could go on, I could list 100 things that the ancients, who were the masters of healing, never ever had to deal with. And there's no medicine for it from that traditional time. But we have it, we have to deal with it. We have to come up with more and more sophisticated ways to deal with all this stuff. And we need to start with what works. And these kinds of systems that we're practicing are what works. And then elaborate. See, I can't tell you what's the traditional Thai treatment for cesium-123 contamination. There's no such thing in the history of the world. Millions of years of history on the planet, that's only existed as a threat to human welfare and health for 50 years. Period, the end. 50 years, that's it. So, no, there's no traditional treatments on how to do that. But we have ideas on how to deal with external pernicious influence. That's what the Chinese would call it. Okay? And, but we have to be smart. We got to know our craft. We have to become masters of our craft. I wish that for every one of you guys. I wish that not only do you walk away with this class with some good stretches, which you can then turn into some circus act for money. I wish that you'll come away with it for more than that you'll actually have a genuine appreciation of your ability to actually help other people and yourself and your family and your friends. Because I see at some point in the future, what if 5 years from now or 10 years from now, you personally are the most knowledgeable therapist, healer, and doctor in the community where you live? Would that community be screwed? Or not? What kind of shape would they be? What if 5 years from now you found yourself in a situation where you were the primary health giver, the primary care person, the primary therapist, the primary natural doctor in a community? Would that community be like toast? Would they have a chance? If you were the person who was the primary responsible person for everyone's welfare? Pass out the Kool-Aid, if not. Yeah.
I was just going to say, yeah, if you think about a regular medical doctor, like what if they couldn't get their medicine? They can't really do much else for
it.
Right.
What the pharmacies are closed.
Yeah.
ATMs are closed.
Power outage.
Now what are you going to do? Now where's your medicine? Because if it's completely dependent on technology, I don't want to be a Luddite, but sometimes I am a little bit, because, for example, my international medical group, SMOC, that I work with, we operate on the principle that we go into areas that have no electricity, no running water. Okay? No electricity, no running water, no pharmacies. If you can't make it, if you can't bring something that you can make it from, it's not going to be available to the population. And so we have medical kits which have concentrates, things like methylene blue and iodine and DE and diatomaceous earth and blood pressure sphygmanometers and thermometers and so on. We have kits that are low tech. They're low tech, and so you can make broad spectrum natural antibiotics for 1,000 people out of 2 ounces of methylene blue diluted in 55 gallons. 2 ounces in 55 gallons. Makes a broad spectrum antibiotic which will treat cholera. Look it up. Okay, I can carry that in my pocket. Okay. DE and so on and so forth. What do you do if there's no electricity? What do you do? What if you can't get to the pharmacy? What if you can't get prescription drugs? You just give up. Most of the world doesn't have access to prescription drugs. Most of the world, 4/5 of the world, do not have access to anything that we think of as medicine. And they're not stacked up like cordwood dead in the street, I can assure you. I've been there. I can assure you. Yeah, there's some illness, but they're not just like dead people piled up on the sidewalks, which is kind of what we're led to believe would happen if our medical system collapsed. And here it probably would. It would be worse than West Africa or East Africa. It would be worse than the poorest part of China. It would be worse than the poorest part of Southeast Asia. It would be worse. Why? Because we would have less natural resources. Because at least they have some working semblance of natural medicine. So if the power goes off, there's like, power's off. Again. There are still places in the world they don't have power if they don't have a generator going. Your own personal generator. If your neighbor doesn't have a generator going, you don't have power. If you want to watch television, up until recently, now they put solar power in all the villages. King paid for it out of his pocket. Put solar panels and generators and so on in all the main remote villages so they can have satellite TV. No, because Thai has a national television educational network that they broadcast every day to the whole country, to remote villages and schools, and they have a multi-level educational program from preschool up, and they show it every day, and that the king sponsors. Okay, I was really proud because I actually got to do 12 shows with Raj Prajanugro and the National Educational Network. Okay, but previously, that's only 10 years old. That's only 10 years ago that went into effect. Previous to that, the villages had usually a generator and a television owned by the richest guy in town, okay, who also sold some Cokes and candy bars out of his house. And in the evening, usually either just before or just after dinner, he'd crank up the generator and turn the television on. And then all the kids in the village would go to that man's house and watch TV, and all their parents would go there and sit on the porch and smoke cigarettes and drink whiskey.
Nice.
And they'd have that for about 2 hours because they just run off a generator. And then when he turned the generator off, then they'd turn the lights off. And so everyone would light their little kerosene lamps and go back to their little house and go to bed. Okay? That was the way it was in the village up until recently. And in those villages, if you needed medicine, you went to someone who could make it or do it to you. There was no like, go to the pharmacy. Like the main Karen village up on the border of Burma and May I, okay, travel time for an average person is 2 days travel time each way to the nearest Western pharmacy. 2 days travel time each way, walking for the first day until you get to a road where you can hitchhike to get to the town in May I, go to the pharmacy, get something at the pharmacy, hitchhike back to the trail heading that goes to the village, and then walk 6 or 8 hours to the village. I know because I've done that trek like 8 times or more, okay? It's a beautiful walk, by the way. I'm not saying not to do it. If you ever get a chance to visit a couple of these villages that take, you know, a day to walk to, or what, it's wonderful, beautiful places, okay? But they don't have access to what we think of as medicine. They don't. And so there's just responsible people in the village who take care of everybody. And that's the way most of the world is. You might think you're learning this for vocation. You might be learning it as a sidebar, it's a little something extra to use in what you do or what have you. But regardless of what you think about that, what I want to share with you is all of you are heading to a place where what you know in relation to healing may actually be necessary, not optional. It's going to come a point where people will have to go to you because they can't get what they need anywhere else, because they will need genuine help, genuine medicine, genuine assistance, and you personally will be the responsible person. And you need to get ready for it. However you do it. You know, whether you do it in this program, whether you do it in another program, or a dozen other programs, that's not the point. It's just the point is, what we're doing is preparation for that, and we want to have fun, but not too much. You know, not so much fun that we forget why we're here. You know, want to have fun, but not so much that we forget why are we practicing in the first place? Because it's genuinely powerful for healing, for medicine. And at some point, you know, you might think, well, it's not like we're EMTs or paramedics, right? Actually, I have lots of EMTs and paramedics who are students. But yeah, yes, you are. See, when people die prematurely, it's almost never from catastrophe. When people give up the ghost, and give up their spirit, and give up their life, and die from chronic illness and so on, it's almost never catastrophic. It's just wearying. They just get to a point where they just don't want to deal anymore. Where they just don't want to have to be hypervigilant anymore. Where they just don't want to explain or defend anymore. Where they just don't want to be in so much pain anymore. That's usually how it goes down. Okay? Well, guess what? Especially this kind of medicine is miraculous for that. Miraculous. Okay? Even though it might not be like, you know, immediate, like triage, like a tracheotomy for an accident victim, you know, that kind of immediate. Okay? But as far as giving people a sense of quality of life and comfortability and the ability to feel like they have more control and they have less pain and higher function, that saves lives over time. We get too fixated on what we call heroic medicine, so that we end up defining medicine as being something that is catastrophic and heroic and requires great resources, financial resources, technological resources, and so on. But for all of human history, that's not what medicine was. It's only now. For all of the timeline of human history, if we went all except for, if we did those little things where it says like, the whole length of human civilization history, how long has Western medicine existed on the curve, on the continuum of Western culture altogether, and it's just like a hairline right here at the end, just a hair, right? So what have people done for medicine up to this point? Well, it hasn't been what we call heroic or catastrophic. There has been that. That's never been the emphasis because that's the least efficient form of medicine. That's why it's so costly. It's the least efficient. It's much more cost effective to start treating someone for stress when they're 20 than it is when they're 70. It's much more cost effective to treat someone for postural abnormalities and spinal issues when they're 25 than when they're 75. Much more. It takes just a little boop, boop. When they're 25, a lot more when they're 75. It's much more cost efficient to start to create an environment that doesn't create cancer than it is to treat a newly diagnosed stage 4 multiple myeloma metastatic cancer. Much more. Big difference. Okay? So what we do is actually the most productive kind of medicine that there is. I'm not backward, bashful, or shy about it. The fact that what I do is slow and incremental and subtle, it's not dramatic, it doesn't demand and rely on extremely high technology like MRIs and that kind of thing. I'm okay with that because I see how what I do relates to tradition and the history of humanity, and know that I don't know if this modern medicine is going to last another 10 years, much less another 100 years or 1,000 years. If our economy collapses, the medicine will collapse right with it. Nobody will be able to afford anything. And if there are rolling blackouts and power outages and whatnot, most hospitals will have to close. They won't be able to function without power. A big hospital without power is a death trap. It's not a good thing. It's not pretty. Look at Haiti. When the hospitals were collapsed and lost of power, what was the first thing you had to do? Get everybody out of the hospitals as quickly as possible. That's why the Cubans set up 6 field hospitals within 3 days. Love those Cubans, those Cuban docs. Didn't ask permission, didn't wait, didn't get funding and financing, didn't ask for donations. There was a team of 25 Cuban doctors that as soon as they heard that there was an earthquake, they just went and ran, grabbed their bags, grabbed tents, bought tickets, and boogied on boats and planes and got to Haiti within 12 hours. There were 20 Cuban docs. And they set up their own tents and started setting up field hospitals out of their own pocket. 14 days before the first U.S. official medical presence in Haiti. 14 days. They'd already treated over 8,000 critical patients before the first American doctor landed on the soil. 8,000. Saved their lives. They would have died had they not been there. That's true medicine. That's medicine, man. That's happening. That's ninja medicine. Those Cuban doctors. Okay, let's do this. Let's take a real quick 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back, and Lydia's going to start.